Hi guys, Andrew Davidson here, and welcome back to another As Per My Ability video. If you like what we do here at As Per My Ability, if you like our videos, if you like our content, if you like board games in general, or you know someone that likes board games in general, please comment, like, subscribe, do all that fun YouTube stuff. Make sure you hit the bell so you get notifications when we post new videos. We appreciate everything that you guys do for As Per My Ability. Now in your left hand, we're going to have my favorite TV show, one of my favorite TV shows of all time. In your right hand, we're going to have one of my favorite card games of all time. So ladies and gentlemen, I'd like you to put your hands together for Game of Thrones, the card game. I'm going to be completely honest with you guys and transparent, as I always am in these videos. I have not read a single sentence of George R.R. Martin's Game of Thrones series. Actually, I think the series is called A Song of Ice and Fire. I have not read any of his books. I have, however, enjoyed the HBO television program. I watched it when it came out. I followed it from week to week, from season to season. I really enjoyed it. In fact, I told people at the time that it was the best show on television when it was on. I've recently started watching, or as they would say, binging the show again for a second time, and I'm incredibly, it's awesome. I'm really enjoying it. Hence why I'm making this video. Now, before I talk about the card game, I want to just give a shout out to the HBO show. If you like Game of Thrones, if you like medieval fantasy, magic, Sopranos meets Lord of the Rings, I highly recommend you check out HBO if you can stomach HBO programming. What do I mean by HBO programming? Yeah, if you if you can stomach some nudity, some violence, some really gratuitous violence, if you can stomach all of that, I really recommend the show. So HBO is not paying me, so enough of that. It's a really great show. If you haven't seen it and that sounds like something that's in your wheelhouse, I highly recommend it. A lot of people had problems with the show. I didn't have problems with it. A lot of people hated the ending. I didn't think the ending was so bad. But these people that I speak of have read the books. I know of at least 2 people that I've sat down with and had some in-depth conversations where they've read the books and they've said the show is bad because it did this instead of this. It didn't follow the books. The ending was, whatever. Coming from somebody who has not read the books at all and just enjoyed the show for what the show was, it's a fantastic show. So enough about that. Let's get into talking about Game of Thrones, the living card game. This is the 2nd edition of the game. Believe it or not, there was actually a 1st edition of the game that was published in the early 2000s, way before it was an HBO television show. I don't know if you can find it or not, but I'm going to be talking and kind of showing off components and some cards from the 2nd edition. It is published by Fantasy Flight Games, designed by Eric Lang, and it's absolutely phenomenal. So it's in the same vein as card games such as L5R, which is Legends of the Five Rings, Netrunner, Magic the Gathering. It's kind of in the same vein as that. So if you're a Magic the Gathering fan, you should really check out Game of Thrones, the living card game, because it has a lot of that card play and a lot of that synergistic kind of stuff. And what I know all you Magic the Gathering guys and gals and people love is it is a deck building game. So you do get to construct, you get to pick your faction, you get to construct your own deck. However, for those of you that are watching this that don't know much about Magic, maybe you played it once like 20 years ago or something like that, here's what I recommend. I recommend that you get this base set, and I also recommend that you get an intro pack, or at least a couple of them. Now, the base set has enough cards for 2 players to basically kind of throw a deck together and start playing with each other, start playing. It is a competitive game. It is a brutal, kind of cutthroat, tear your opponent down, make them feel helpless, play cards to, just be nasty Yeah, so you can buy this, and you can play this with 2 people, or, you know, you can buy it, and I recommend you probably supplement it with some of these, they're called intro packs, where, as you can see, I have the House Baratheon here. I actually have all of them, but this is the one that I grabbed for just to show off to the camera. The intro packs are basically deck built for you. So if you like deck building, this is a game that's going to satisfy that. But if you also want to just pick something up and just start playing and just experience how the game works right out the gate, then this is what you're going to want to get. If you want to pick up some of these starter packs, all you do is open these up, shuffle, start playing. So in Game of Thrones, you can play a couple of different ways. If you buy the base game, you can play just 2 players. There's not enough cards in here, but it is a multiplayer game. You can play with up to 4 players if you buy, you know, more packs, or if you buy 2 of these, you can put together decks to play for 4 players, which is phenomenal, by the way. Playing 4 players is a really cool intrigue sort of game of who are you going to go after. Some of the cards don't allow you to go after certain people depending on your relationship with them during that round. Not going to get into it, but it is a multiplayer game as well. So there's that. But you're going to need to buy some more cards. So what I'd like to do is, I'd like to basically cut away, show you a little bit about how a round works, come on back here and muster all the charisma that I have in my bones to hopefully try to sell this game to you and see if anyone will go out there and buy it. So that's my goal for this video, is to just try to turn some people on to this incredibly well-designed. The artwork, as you'll probably see in a moment, is fantastic. So let's cut away and show a little bit about the game, and then come on back and we'll see if I can't convince you to go and get this game. Welcome, welcome, welcome to Game of Thrones, the living card game. This is the 2nd edition of the game. The 1st edition came out in 2000s. Both editions are published by Fantasy Flight Games, designed in part by Eric Lang, who's one of my favorite designers. This is the 2nd edition, and I prefer the 2nd edition, and I strongly recommend that you prefer the 2nd edition for a few reasons. One, the 1st edition is probably not as easy to find. I don't know, I haven't been looking for it because I don't need it. Second, the 2nd edition is much better because the cards there's been some errata that's been implemented on the cards, so the writing of some of the cards is a little easier to understand. There were problems with the way that some of the cards read the text on them, where it was like, I don't know what that means or how that ability works. These ones have the game has been streamlined. And last but absolutely, definitely, in my opinion, not least, the first the 1st edition had very cheesy early 2000s artwork. It didn't pop. It wasn't great for me. The artwork in this one is phenomenal. So before moving forward, I have to give my disclaimer. This video is in no way, shape, or form a tutorial video. What my goal is on my channel is to just expose some kind of cool games I want to talk about, games that have stories, legacy games, some card games like alternative to Magic the Gathering kind of games, you know, whatever it may be, but I do not necessarily run tutorials. So, my disclaimer, let's get it out of the way. This is in no way, shape, or form a tutorial video that explains every single detail in regards to play the game. There is a Fantasy Flight tutorial, a kind of an animated tutorial that is pretty sweet. You can find it on YouTube. You just got to search it up. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm just going to be kind of giving you, the audience, an idea of how the game works. So the first thing that you're going to do when you play the Game of Thrones is you win or you die. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to pick one of the factions. Now, what I recommend is that you pick up, as I've already talked about and showed, it's one of these introductory decks. because they basically, I have more of them, but these are the ones that I have available for the shooting right now. They basically come with a pre-made deck, and the pre-made deck just means that everything's there, the cards, you're ready to go right out of the box. It also comes with the introductory decks. Here, let me open this paper. It comes folded. Oh, this is the Night's Watch. It comes with this sheet of paper that gets kind of folded in there, and it will tell you and give you kind of instructions as far as what this deck does. So when I bought the Night's Watch, intro deck, it tells me, hey, we've assembled this deck for you, and this is kind of how you're supposed to play, like, what it does. Every faction has their own, let's wrap this back up. Every faction has their own little intricacies. It's kind of an asymmetrical game, so some factions work better this way, and some factions work better the other way. Now, there are 8 factions that you can choose from. There is the Baratheons, the Lannisters, the Starks, the Targaryens, the Martells, and the Tyrells, and the Night's Watch. I'm not sure why the Night's Watch is a family faction in this game, but hey, it is. So there are 8 factions that you can select from. Now, the name of the game is Game of Thrones, but what's the goal of the game? The goal of the game is to collect 15 power tokens on your cards or your faction card, and they look like this. These are power tokens. And there are also some other tokens in the game which I'll show off since there's also money tokens. This is what money looks like. So, having said that, I know I've really been boosting the idea of picking up an intro deck. I also would recommend picking up a copy of the base game. It's a square box. I've just kind of showed you at the intro. It's a square box. It comes with some cards that you can help with some deck building, which again, I'm not going to go into. But it also comes with these tokens. Now, I know what you're saying. You're saying, Andrew, well, why don't I just use pennies and quarters? That's absolutely fine as long as you delineate which are which. Like, quarters are going to be your money and pennies are going to be your power. So you don't necessarily need to have the base game, but why not? If you're going to go whole hog, if you want to go whole hog, then I recommend picking up the base game and probably picking up some of these intro decks as well, just because you don't have to worry about deck building at all, at least right out the box. If you're someone who's super into deck building, then you can build a deck by just picking up the base game. So let's keep things moving along. For edification purposes, I am going to be using the Baratheon faction, and so I will take the Night's Watch out. So, like I said, the goal of the game is to get 15 power on your faction card or on some of your other cards, because there are other cards that can collect power. Once you get 15, the game is automatically over. Nobody gets to do anything. You don't finish out the round. You just basically, boom, I'm done. I got 15. That's game. After you've got your deck put together, either through the intro deck or through deck building, you're going to select some people to play with. You're going to play. Now, Game of Thrones is great because you can play 1 versus 1, or you can play multiplayer. You can play up to 4 players. And when you play with the 4 players, there's more intrigue and factions, like alliances. With a multiplayer game, it's absolutely fantastic playing this game multiplayer. But you can play it heads up, like a Magic the Gathering game. And so let's just pretend that we're playing heads up and we're playing Baratheon versus the Night's Watch. So as me, the Baratheon player, the first thing that we do is we have, like I said, we have our deck. Yes, there are certain rules that apply to deck building in this game, but again, I'm not going to go over them. I just want to give a feel of the game. So everyone's going to start off with by drawing, let me move this, we're going to draw 7 cards. You will draw them in your hand. However, for video purposes, I'm going to be flipping them face up like this. Although typically you would, of course, not show your cards that you've drawn to your opponent or opponents. What do we have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We need one more if we can kind of get it on the screen. So you have basically a handful of cards. Now, before the game even starts, we're completely into setup, you are allowed to play up to 8 gold, which is represented up in the left-hand corner. You can play up to 8 gold cards to start the game. And that's what I like about this game. Instead of like Magic the Gathering, where you start with nothing and you have to kind of build your mana, and every turn you've got to play some mana so you can have some more mana and stuff like this. In this game, you start with at least something, and the choice is yours. So let's say that we have Robert Baratheon here, and he's 7. So we definitely are going to start the game with him, because I want to start the game with a really powerful character. And so since he costs 7, if I had a 1-cost card in my hand for a character, I could play him and the 1-cost character. However, I do not. So I would basically put this face down until my opponent has chosen all of their cards to start with or whatever, and then we would reveal, and they would go out onto the table. So this would be in front of me, and we would start the game. So I'm going to move this stuff around, since you would have this kind of in front of you like this, and put a deck here. Let's go like this. Okay. So then once you reveal, you will draw back up to 7 cards. So I played 1 card, so I would basically just draw 1 card. If you played 2, you would draw 2. You go back up to 7 cards. Now the first part of actually starting the game, so that was just the intro or the setup to the game, is you would start with your plot cards. Now these are sideways, they're printed sideways, and every person is going to construct basically a little mini deck of 7 plot cards. And when you get to the plot phase, you can select any plot card that you want to play. They are all available to you. And so let's say, to start off the game, where's that wildling? There we go. Or wildfire. Let's say I'm going to play this one to start. And the plot cards basically dictate how the round is going to go for you. So again, you would keep it secret until your opponent is ready, and then you would reveal. So what do the plot cards do, and what do they mean? So this is the Wildfire Assault. In the left-hand corner where it says 4, I'm going to basically get 4 coins. So I get 4 coins to spend on this turn, because like I said, you're going to be playing a new plot card every round. So I get 4 gold for this round. Any gold that you don't use at the end of the round, you lose. Next to it is a 7. It is called the initiative. So whoever has the highest initiative, let's say I have 7 here and my opponent has 3, that means that I win initiative. Now what does that mean? Initiative basically means that I get to choose whether if I want to go first or if I want my opponent to go first. Now you might be thinking, why wouldn't you just want to go first? Well, sometimes in a very strategic games like this, there are decks and cards that are more reactionary, and so it kind of behooves the player to let the opponent go first to see what they're going to do, so that way a lot of your cards can react to what your opponent is going to do. So even if you win initiative, you can pass and say, I'm going to let you go first. Oh, hang on, time out. There is, if you buy the base game, there is a first player token. So I have let's say I have 1 initiative with my 7, but I'm going to give first player to myself. Let's just pretend. And so that is the initiative. And then the last one is what's called a claim value. It's number 1. Most of the plot cards have the value 1 printed on them. There are a couple that I've seen that have the value of 2, and that's pretty sweet. The claim number is basically when you win challenges in this game, whatever the outcome is for that challenge, and we'll get into it if you can hang with me, that this number is what you're going to be afforded when you win a challenge. So if it's a combat challenge, I'm going to kill one person. If it's an intrigue challenge, I'm going to basically scrap 1 card from your hand. If it's a power challenge, then I'm going to gain one power token. Oops, I grabbed 2, but I would gain 1 power token. So this is your claim value, and then there's some text that happens which I'm not going to go into. Again, this is not a super detailed thing. And then down in the corner here where it says 6, that is basically what you have to downsize your hand to at the end of the round. And so at the end of the round, you are going to have, focus, you're going to have 6 cards in your hand at the end. So you'll have to discard down. So once the plot card has been played on the table and has been resolved, you are going to then move to the draw phase where each person will draw 2 cards and add it to their hand. I'll just do that now. Draw 2 cards. And then we get into probably the biggest part of Game of Thrones, the card game. And it's called the marshalling phase. Now, marshalling basically means where you can play cards from your hand. So you're going to be playing people. Now, as I've already kind of gone through the different cards, I'll say it one more time. There are characters, there are locations, and there are events. And those do not count as part of your plot card deck, this thing. And one thing I should mention about your plot card is once you play this card, it stays on the table. So next round, when we are evaluating for plot cards, I only have these to choose from, which I would then, let's just say for example, I would play this plot card, and then next one, maybe I would play this one. Once all your plot cards are exhausted or you're completely out, if the game lasts that long, then you are allowed to pick up everything and start anew with all of your plot cards. But typically, once a plot card is played, it is played to the table and is gone for good. Okay, sorry for that aside. Marshalling. Marshalling phase is where you're going to pay gold to pay for characters to put them into action, into the battlefield. So, for example, I have this character here that is the Fiery Followers. And so they cost 3. So let's just pretend I spent 3 gold to put them out with Robert Baratheon. Then my opponent would get a chance to play a card, and then I would then play more cards if I could. Let's just pretend, for example, that I played this card, Maya Stone. And so I played this one, and this would get played out. I know it's out of screen, so I'll just put it under here. Normally, you just kind of have a line of cards that you play until people pass. Once everyone passes, I pass, my opponent passes, then we go on to the actual fun of the game. Fun is an operative word there because sometimes when you're getting the floor mopped with you, thank you, Alex Davidson, it's probably not the best part of the game that you enjoy. So, unlike Magic the Gathering, which is a game that honestly I'm going to be just brutal, I find to be quite lacking compared to some of the other card games that I've played. But unlike Magic the Gathering, there are 3 different types of attacks. So let's look at the most basic one, and that is called a combat challenge. In order to initiate a combat challenge, the character that you basically kneel, which is basically turning sideways or tapping, again for you Magic fans, has to have a sword. So this character can be used in a combat attack. So if I were to initiate a combat attack a challenge, I should get my terminology right, I would turn it sideways, and I can turn as many as possible as I want because Robert Baratheon also has a sword. Then I would add up the number 2 and 5, so I would say 7 to my opponent. My opponent can then block, but he or she can only block with characters that have a sword. So, because some characters don't always have a sword, if they don't have a sword, you cannot block with them with a challenge, with a combat challenge. If they do have a sword, then you can tap them to basically say, I declare as a blocker. If you win basically your claim value. So going back to our claim value, my claim value, as you remember, was 1. So if my attack is 6 and they only block for 4, I win. 6 is higher than 4, which means I get the claim value of 1. That means that my opponent on the other side of the table has to take one of their characters. Let's use this guy. It can be anyone. It doesn't have to be someone that was involved in the challenge. anyone, and they have to kill them off. So then they would remove them and put them into a discard pile, because that is my claim. If my claim, for example, was 2, then they would have to kill off 2 characters, but it wasn't. It was only 1. The second type of challenge is called an intrigue challenge. It is represented by a green eyeball. An intrigue challenge operates the same way. Here, I'm just kind of resetting. And you basically declare an intrigue. You have to state that, you have to state it to your opponent, because it's good ethics to state, I am starting an intrigue challenge, and then you tap your intrigue cards. I'm running out of camera space. And then you announce your strength, 2. So the other player on the other side, again, just the same way, they can block as provided that the character has the appropriate icon. Now this character, I know I'm using Baratheon characters, but this character, as you see, has no eyeball. That means this character cannot be used to initiate intrigue or defend an intrigue challenge. So he cannot be used. Let's say that my opponent has nobody to block, or in a very specific example, they have someone to block, but they choose not to because they don't want to exhaust the character or kneel the character. And so if they choose to leave it what's called undefended, the player that's initiating the attack will gain 1 power for their faction just because it was undefended. Now, how intrigue challenges work is if I win, which let's say I did because it was undefended, that means that I get my claim value, which again is 1, and I get to reach across to the other side of the table, and I get to remove at random a card from their hand, excuse me. And so that basically gets rid of cards in your opponent's hand. And then this card would just be revealed and go to a discard pile. And so that is intrigue. That is a way of kind of sucking their cards, because some of the cards are events that they can play that will really screw up, your agenda that you're trying to do. So by pulling those cards out of their hand, it's a really great thing. I really like intrigue. I like to play intrigue a lot. Okay, take a breath. The third challenge that you can initiate is called the power challenge. And again, fundamentally, it works exactly the same. A character must have the power symbol to be involved in a power challenge. I would announce to my opponent using good gamer ethics, saying I'm initiating a power challenge. I would then tap anyone that I want to be involved in the power challenge, and then my opponent can block. If I win the power challenge, I get the claim. What's the claim, you might ask? Well, you probably already know. I get the power. Now let's say that it's undefended. Well, if it's undefended, then I always get 1 extra one. So that is if I win. If I don't win, nothing happens. And that goes for all of the different challenges: combat, intrigue, and your power challenges. If you do not win those challenges, nothing happens. They basically just stave off the attack or what have you, and nothing happens. I'm just giving you all 3 examples as if you had won. So since you've won these and won this power challenge, you would get some power on your faction card. There are ways that certain characters, through keywords and text, which again I'm not going through, can collect power on their card. That power is added to this power, so they do work. But unfortunately, if your opponent plays a card that kills off that person, you lose that power. The power does not transfer over to your faction, and that person is dead. So that's where power can kind of be going well for you, and then all of a sudden a character could be killed off, and now you're like, okay, well, Robert Baratheon is killed. How appropriate. And so I've lost the power that's stored on his card. And the goal is to get to 15. Now, about challenges, a player may or may not initiate one of each challenge in any order that they want. So typically, and again, this is a complex game, so there are games or cards, I should say, that allow you to, you play a card and say, oh, I can do 2 combat challenges. But for the basic idea of the game, a player can initiate 1 combat, 1 intrigue, and then 1 power challenge on their challenge's turn. They can do all 3, they can do 1, they can do none. It's totally up to them, and they can do them in any order that they want. When they are done with their challenges, then they pass turn to the defender. The defender then works the exact same way. They can initiate 1 combat, 1 intrigue, and 1 power, and your cards will stay tapped. So if you go first, just like Magic the Gathering, you got to be cognizant of not leaving yourself to where everything's going to be undefended. So, for example, you might want to leave someone standing that could take on a power challenge because you feel like they're going to go after power with the deck that they're running or something like that. And so once I have gone, once my player or my opponent has gone, then we will enter the next phase. The next phase is called dominance. The dominance phase is basically where players are going to add up the attack value of all of their standing cards. So if this guy were tapped, I would not be adding his value. So I would say there's a 2 here. So my dominance number is 2. And then you add any gold that you did not spend. So let's just say I didn't spend 3 gold. So 3 plus 2 is 5. So my dominance is 5. Let's say, again, for example, I know I'm just pretending like I win all these things. Let's say my opponent's is 1. So 5 beats 1. That means that I have officially won dominance and I gain a power. At that point, you basically go through just a resetting of the game. Like I've mentioned, any money that you did not spend is lost. All of your characters will reset and stand back up. Then you will have to look at the value, like I said, and discard down. Discard down. So if I had 9 cards in my hand, I would have to get rid of cards until I had 6. Well, now I cannot use the wildfire assault again in my plotting. So when we start the second round, I will look at these cards, and then let's say I will pick this card, and then 1, 2, 3, and we would reveal. Now this one gives me 9 gold, but my initiative is 0. My claim is 1. And there's also a certain text. So that's basically, literally, bare bones how a round works. You start with the plot phase, which is going to kind of delineate how your round is going to go. Then after that, you draw 2 cards. Then after that, you are going to marshal cards, which is basically using gold to play cards into your hand, or from your hand onto the table. You can play characters. You can play locations. Some of them you can play events. And then after that, you enter into the challenge phase, which is the meat and potatoes of the game. Well, you'll be activating challenges and trying to get 15 power. After that is dominance, where if you were frugal and you decided not to spend a whole lot of your money, that's going to help you out because that'll all count towards your dominance, along with the power of people that you did not use during the challenge phase. And then you will gain 1 power for dominance. There are some plot cards that allow you to gain more if you win dominance. And so plot cards are very influential as to how you're going to want to run that particular round until you get to another round where you would basically cover that up and have a new plot card. This is how the game is going to work. You're going to keep going over and over. Like I said, if you run out of plot cards, if you're completely out, then you get to pick them all back up. Oops, you get to pick them all back up and start again. Typically, if you're playing with some pretty competent or savvy players, I haven't seen, I've watched some games online. I haven't seen games that go past 7 rounds, just because once you get the flow of it and you know what you're doing, you can be very aggressive, especially if you build your deck in a certain way that you understand and you know how to play, you know when to play cards, you know when to activate certain abilities, and you know when to save money so that you can trigger certain event cards. Once you know your deck and you know kind of how to work it and how to read your opponent, you'll have a lot of fun with this game. There's a lot of strategy to it. There's a lot of when do you wait, when do you go, when do you hold back, you know, when do you hold them, when do you fold them, kind of thing like that. So this is how you play Game of Thrones, the 2nd edition, published by Fantasy Flight Games. It plays, like I said, one-on-one, or you can play multiplayer, which is absolutely fantastic. So let's get back to my thoughts about the game, see if I can't maybe talk you into trying out this fantastic LCG. So that's a little bit about how the game works. Now, as I've already said, it is not what you just watched was not a tutorial. It's basically just kind of giving you a sense of the game or a feeling of the game of like, does this look like something that I would want? Maybe yes, maybe no. My goal right now, within the next 5 minutes, is to try to sell you on this game. So, here we go. Game of Thrones. First of all, who's this? Okay, so who's this game for? If you like Game of Thrones, ding, this game is for you. It's got all the characters in it. It's got characters I don't even really know. It's got characters that show up in the HBO show for like 2 seconds and then they walk off and you're like, oh, there's a card for that person. It's awesome. If you like Game of Thrones, ding, check 1. Number 2, if you like deck building games, ding, check 2. Because this, like I said, is a deck building game. I do recommend that you start off with an intro pack if you're not already a big deck builder guy, if you haven't played Magic for like 100,000 years or however long the game's been out. If you haven't messed with other games such as Arkham Horror, the LCG, Lord of the Rings, the LCG, you know, other games like that, then you might want to just, I love that they just did these packs where you shuffle and you just play. I love that. That's awesome. So, deck building, ding. If you like that cutthroat sort of, I screw you over for the lack of better terms, I play cards. There are a lot of cards that are nasty. There's a lot of take that to this game. There's a lot of events that you can play that cancel things and do things. Ding, that is in this game. And finally, last but not least, if you want something that you're like, I want something that plays just more than me and another person. This game, ding, does, as I mentioned, play 4 players, up to 4 players. So, on all those check marks, if I hit most of them, some of them, this is going to be a game for you. So, that's it. I'm going to wrap it up. Game of Thrones, the living card game. You should go out and pick it up. Make sure you get the 2nd edition, because the 2nd edition is awesome. And that's all. That's going to be it from me. So, thanks everyone for watching. Again, my name is Andrew Davidson for As Per My Ability, and I will see you at the next video. In your left hand, we're going to have my favorite. We're going to get it right. We're just going to get it right.